I didn't practice my introduction, so I'm going to be first. So good afternoon, and welcome to this afternoon's Global Environmental Speaker Series. If you don't already know me, I'm Dr. Janine Kiefer. I'm the Visual Resources Librarian, and I teach in art history. In this term, my class Evolution and Challenge in Architecture seemed to be the ideal context in which to welcome today's speaker, Dr. Georgios Pardalis. He's from the IIIEE, the International Institute of Industrial Environmental Economics at Lund University in Lund, Sweden. He's a man of many interests. He trained as an architect and engineer, then pursued a few master's degrees in industrial engineering and management, civil and environmental engineering, and sustainability science. He did his PhD, some PhD work at the IIIEE in sustainable energy innovation, and holds his PhD from Linnaeus University in Sweden. In a previous life, he volunteered with Engineers Without Borders, working in Africa and Southeast Asia, working on community well-being projects and critical infrastructure development and restoration. And as an adventurer, he rode his motorcycle from Greece to India. He's active in Renovate Europe, campaign promoting energy efficiency and energy justice in residential buildings in Europe. He's developed the first one-stop shop in Sweden, which up till now has renovated more than 700 houses in collaboration with bigger organizations. And he is active in developing networks of similar business entities in Sweden and abroad. He's been a consultant in the development of several one-stop shops for energy renovations in European countries. Today he will speak on the challenge of renovating historic and heritage buildings in Sweden. So welcome, Dr. Pardalis.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me even back. I tend to speak quite loud. So to get you a bit through the presentation today, it will be pretty easy. First, we'll talk about the energy efficiency aspirations in the EU to understand the whole context that led into the one-stop shop business model. Then we will go a bit through the European Union landscape regarding buildings, not only focusing on residential, but general buildings, because it is quite a tricky landscape to navigate. Then I will talk briefly about the one-stop shop business model itself and how we ended up with that in Europe. I will transfer it to the Swedish landscape regarding buildings, because there we have to deal with quite many challenges. I will go with two examples where we have applied one-stop shop. One is a renovation of a detached house that we have already delivered, and the other one is an ongoing renovation that we are doing. You will see the tricks on that. And then I will share with you some lessons learned from the process we have followed. When we talk about energy efficiency aspirations in the EU, everything has to do with concepts that you are pretty aware of here in the States as well. Minimizing greenhouse gas emissions, saving the ecosystems and the broader environment, saving the glaciers. We had actually quite some problem, not to those that are in the Nordics, but those that are in the Alps in the late years. Greening the economy in general in the European Union, and all of them have been into the concept of energy efficiency. When it goes to the goals of European Union regarding energy efficiency, things are tricky. First of all, we had the climate and energy package that by 2020 mandated 20% cut of greenhouse gas emission, 20% of energy coming from renewables, and 20% improvement in energy efficiency. That didn't work pretty well in the majority of countries. So we came with a change of goals, at least 40% in cuts in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. This goes pretty okay nowadays. At least 32% share for renewable energy. This goes pretty well in the EU. and at least 32.5% improvement in energy efficiency. That does not go pretty well in all sectors. And then we went with the European Green Deal, a broader framework for energy efficiency, that has as a goal that by 2050, European Union will achieve carbon neutrality. In some sectors, we are already there. In other sectors, we are still pretty far away. But if we want to take it on the reduction achieved so far, don't be tricked by the minus 29% of the EU average, because this mainly applies to the industrial sector. When we go to transportation, when we are going to building and services, we are far away from that yet. For primary and final energy consumption, the current target is pretty okay, quite close to the 40% that we have up to 2030. Probably it will be achieved. But the new target that European Union has set some months ago doesn't seem to be able to be achieved. But at least we are striving to get as close as it gets. If you see, regarding the new targets, we have the historical emission, we have some projections where it will go up to 230, 235, but we're still quite far away from where we want to reach in 2050. And that is a challenge that has many parameters by themselves, can be different lectures. When we go to the buildings, the mix of buildings in the European Union is quite diverse. But let's start with the goals. They account for 40% of final energy consumption, especially for heating. Still, many European buildings use electricity as a heating measure, and they are responsible for 36% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. There is a huge potential for cuts, and that's exactly what we are trying to do. Almost 75% of the existing buildings are inefficient, and they will require energy renovation on a large scale. Just think of different countries or cities you have in mind. Quite a huge building stock that is before the Second World War. And if less energy is going to be used and more green energy is included in the mix, then we hope for fewer emissions. It came different kind of policy and different kind of strategies for both residential and non-residential buildings. The member states had to set minimum energy performance standards. By 2030 at first, lower than 16% of the worst performing buildings. You will see later on that when we talk about the old building stock, this is a very puzzling case to achieve, at least in the majority of countries. And by 2033, lower than 26% of the worst performing buildings. In some countries, it has been included in the legislation to go in the worst performing buildings as the building stock is, but in other countries, this comparison when compared to a newly built, and there creates a challenge, because a building from the 20s, pretty hard to achieve that level of a newly built. Also for residential buildings, by 2030, we have a goal to decrease 16% the energy use by 2030. Some countries are already there. The majority of countries, as you will see later on in graphs, are far from there. And by 2035, this minimization to go to 20 to 22%. For green energy in buildings, mostly solar energy installations is what we have to do with big urban environments. By 2027, all new public and non-residential buildings with useful area over 250 square meters, they need to install at least a small-scale PV system. By 2028, this will expand to non-residential buildings over 2,000 square meters. We'll go to big shopping centers, big office buildings, and so on and so forth. By 2029, this will go to all buildings no matter of use. Already it's heavily subsidized in some countries, so to promote it. By 2030, all new residential buildings, all new roofed car parks next to buildings need to have such installation. And by 2031, all existing buildings that have an area larger than 250 square meters are expected to have installed a PV system. All is a goal that I'm quite sure that European Union will not exist, but what we're striving at the moment is at least 45% of buildings in urban environments to have a PV system installed in some way. Of course, there are exceptions. Historical buildings, and you will see later on why it is tricky, the term historical buildings. Practically, what is referred to in the legislation is castles, where you cannot have such systems, places of worship and buildings used for religious activities, small cottages for holidays, and buildings owned by the military or for defense purposes, and industrial sites, which is quite fun because right now there are the industrial sites and the agricultural buildings that install the highest amount of PV systems in Europe. If we see the buildings per sector, you see that regarding where they were built, you can see quite a large amount of buildings built before the end of the Second World War, or straight after the end. And you can see that we have quite an old building stock. The challenge that the European Union focus at the time is the buildings that are built between the 60s and the 80s. Because in the 80s we had a change in the regulation of the energy performance and environmental performance of buildings. So some things do not require radical changes, but those that are between 60s and 80s are the buildings that have the best solution to be renovated at a reasonable cost and produce actual change in energy performance. If we take it by use, you will see that we have quite a mix of single-family houses and multi-family buildings, and a larger amount of trade buildings and buildings for other uses. The building stock of the European Union is mostly residential. In terms of occupancy, we have the vast majority is for primary residence, a logical number as a secondary residence, and we have some vacant that in countries there are projects how to use them for the benefit of the society or to create housing justice in the local communities, and so on and so forth. This is the fun fact. When we see the number of renovated buildings in Europe, we see quite a high number in some countries. This is a very tricky number though, because when we talk about renovation in general, even if you paint the outer walls of your house, it is considered a renovation. Even if you change glass on your windows, it is considered a renovation. When we are going to go to the energy renovation of them, the renovation rate per sector, you will see that it's quite high in terms of percentage. But when we are going to the energy renovation, that actually is going to produce the results we want, we go in most of the countries below 0.6%. The optimal goal, in order to be as close as we can to the goals that I described before, is to have minimum 3% of the buildings renovated in every country every year. So from 0.6 to 3%, it's quite a distance. But European Union, since they saw a big opportunity, a big market opportunity for that, they came quite strong with the one-stop shop business model. It is a model that is not innovative at all. It is quite an old business model existing in the market, but we have tried to apply it in the building sector. Probably you all are going to recognize where one-stop shop comes from. it was the first one-stop shop ever developed in the world. If we try to put it from groceries to renovation, the connections are pretty clear. We want combination of materials and products in difficult trades, somehow to bring all the different people involved in renovation in one place, focus on this renovation, deal with complex characteristics that the renovation of a building has. It's still, per country, very difficult to evaluate how these combinations of solutions will work, but at least we have a clear view of what kind of solutions need to be applied per building. We save the customer from the huge investment of finding all those different professionals and from the huge transaction cost of trying to bring all those professionals together. We assist them in order to make more informed decisions and have a more streamlined renovation. And at the very end, we create an effective solution at a reasonable cost for them. European Union has propagated in any possible way one can imagine. It is still in the new Energy Efficiency Directive. It clearly says about one-stop shop. We have the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive that says that in order to achieve the goals, especially in the building sector, we need to improve financing of buildings and develop one-stop shop and utilize one-stop shop as advisory and assistant tools. Countries have to develop long-term renovation strategies, part of which is to facilitate access to mechanisms such as one-stop shops. They shall provide to their people and their communities information through accessible and transparent advisory tools such as renovation advice and one-stop shop. The renovation advice has been applied in municipalities. One-stop shops are again in the market. The term one-stop shop exists in the recommendation on building renovation. It exists in the recommendation on building modernization. It has a whole paragraph dedicated to itself in the Fit for 55 package that is about circularity and efficiency of materials in the European Union. It is clearly stated in the new governance directive, and of course, it is included in the Smart Finance for Buildings initiative that comes from the European Investment Bank. But what is one-stop shop in actual renovation? Practically, it is based on the logic that the homeowner will have one contract for the whole renovation and one contact point. They do not have to deal with different professionals themselves, but they have a dedicated person working for them on that. And we try to create a model that provides all renovation-related services in one place. The majority you will see, because there are different types, those that go throughout the whole renovation, they offer pre-renovation audit, tailor-made proposals of measures for each building, long-term renovation planning, and in some cases, even financing plan, coordination of renovation work and guarantees of quality and energy savings. We have even developed a contractual agreement that guarantees this thing. As I said, financing in some cases that comes in different ways. We have tried many different financing models. And of course, post-renovation audit and follow-up up to 5 years in most of the cases. So we can guarantee that at least in 1/5 of the life cycle of most materials, we have performed a good work. It is a polymorphic model. It comes in many different variations. Either sometimes the one-stop shop will do the marketing to the homeowner or the professionals, or the one-stop shop will come and streamline the whole process, or the one-stop shop will be a digital entity that will streamline the renovation process, or it will deal with all the difficult work, including getting permission from the municipality, communicating with artisans, securing financing, performing even the renovation themselves. or it will be the central point for all the different actors involved, or even doing what it's quite known in the US, the PACE programs. We have tried it. In some communities it was successful. In the vast majority of Europe, still is questionable if it can work. But all of these different constellations of one-stop shop model are separated in three very distinct categories. We have the facilitation one-stop shops that practically get all the info for the homeowner and come with a set of solutions, proposals. It's not committing for the homeowner to follow those proposals. We have the coordination one-stop shops that practically run the whole process in the shadows without necessarily delivering the work themselves. And we have the all-inclusive one-stop shops that take the homeowner from the very beginning up to the end of the renovation. And the goal for us from the very beginning was to apply it in any kind of building. So far in Europe, we had more than 135 efforts to develop one-stop shops. Some are still in planning phase in different countries. At the moment, we have 46 fully operating one-stop shops. By fully operating, I mean that they have at least 5 years in the market. And they are in 7 different countries. Most of them are in the Netherlands and Belgium. If we go to Sweden, Sweden is a bit of a difficult country because we have 4 very different climate zones. So houses come with very different needs. But again, we have a vast majority of residential building stock, nothing crazy there. We have again a very good balance between single family and multi-family houses. We have about 45% single family houses and 55% multi-family houses. What is fun is that the single family houses are occupied by a larger population than the multi-family houses. We have many multi-family residential units that are occupied just by one person. In terms of occupancy, again, primary residence is the king. Secondary residence, it's not that extended because the landscape helps that some primary residents can work as secondary residences as well. And we have quite a significant number of vacant houses that, again, we have tried programs of local development on how we're going to have better use of them. The proposal that came lately from us is to renovate some of those abandoned houses, mostly they are old houses, to a living standard, then sell them at a lower price to low-income families or people that they want to start a business in the areas that those exist, and then they are responsible for the further renovation of it. When it goes to the number of renovated buildings, quite many are renovated. And when it goes to the rate of renovations, is pretty nice. Again, general renovation, as we said from the beginning. But when we go to the energy, Sweden is in 0.3. And being a country with quite an old building stock, this 0.3, it's a bit painful. But you will realize why it is painful later on. The idea for renovations became more evident in the last year as the number of newly built decreases. So the big companies in the country, they do have operations to be occupied with. But the small and medium-sized companies that operate in the building sector, there is plenty of business that is still not used. We have calculated that if we renovate 2% of Sweden's residential buildings to the minimum possible of renovation, let's say 15% of the building, we talk about a market of around $1 billion per year. It's a huge market. for those companies. Maybe not for the big players, but the small and medium-sized companies is a big market. We have, as I said, very good balance between single-family and multi-family houses. 2.1 million one or two family houses, 2.7 multi-dwelling buildings. We have 300,000 special buildings and 800,000 other types of buildings. We have a problem with the non-residential buildings. Why? Because it is the responsibility of the municipality to register them, municipalities and regions, and because we have problem with the changes of use. There is a very complicated landscape regarding the use of buildings and the changes of use that leads to this sub-registration of them. So we don't have a clear view how many are non-residential and what exactly are the uses of non-residential. We have 950,000 that are built before the 40s, and also we have estimated that about 40% of the non-residential are built in the same period. And such buildings, according to the Swedish terminology, are qualified as historical. Buildings that are built before the 20s, we have that mark. Buildings that are built before 20s and 40s, they will just have not the Minnesmerke, that is like memory mark for them. So they are characterized as cultural historical, but they are not a memory point, if we can say that. The historical buildings are very important in the Swedish society. Why? Because they have architectural significance, they represent styles, techniques, or innovation of their time. They are designed by renowned architects, we have quite many in Sweden, to be honest, featuring unique designs or craftsmanship. If you ever visit Stockholm, Göteborg, or other historical cities, you will realize the significance. They have cultural importance. It is very strong, the culture of inheriting from the past and having it in the present and future in the Swedish society. Some of them are connected with ethnic groups. Others are connected with social movements and artistic movements. Those latter have also excellent artistic value because they have some really great artwork in them, sculptures and other decorative elements that are very unique. And they are important as landmarks for the cities they belong to. As far as it concerns their localities, it is a source of identity. You will hear people, for example, in Gothenburg say that I live in Majorna area. That is an area that has the houses there of those working at the ports from the 20s. It's very important for them to live there. Or in Stockholm to say that I live in the old city. It's of great importance. It is a source of revenue for local businesses. Just check how much only the old city of Stockholm has on an average every year more than 7 million tourists passing. It's too big for the local economy. Also, in terms of education, because it allows people to learn about the local history and the cultural practices. It allows them to connect with the past, that is very important, as I said, for the Swedish society. And it creates an intergenerational dialogue and learning. Also very important in the Swedish society is the preservation of craftsmanship. Sweden has the pride that it has many renowned craftsmen, especially stonemasons. It is important to keep their work there. It allows Swedes to have a cultural exchange and exchange with other cultures within their own city. It creates a neighborhood character. Some people consciously move to areas with historical buildings because they express something, and this takes to the further generation. More artistic movements want to move in the old city. In the older parts of Malmö, many political movements move there because it is connected with the political character of the city. Also, it helps a lot to the enhancement of property values. Older buildings in Sweden cost a lot, And they promote social equity and inclusion, and of course, they have a view nowadays how they can promote those buildings, environmental sustainability, how they become beacons of environmental sustainability. But renovating such buildings, as our experience has showed, it's a desperate move, and you will realize why. Going in some renovations, applying one-stop shop. Just to realize with what kind of buildings we have to deal when we talk about historical buildings, I will show some very beautiful buildings. This one is from the south of Sweden, the South Baltic coast of Sweden, southwest. Because the area is rich in limestone, the buildings there are built with limestone. We go to central Sweden, where you have limestone mostly, or granite. Buildings are built with granite. You go to the Atlantic coast of Sweden, and you have too much clay, so we have bricks in all buildings. Then you go up to the north, too much wood, we have wooden structures. You go to the center of Sweden, where are Sweden's deepest forests, we have wooden houses again. So we have rather big complexity of materials to deal with and pretty unique characteristics per area that we are called to renovate. This last house is one of the first houses that we have renovated. Bldgs municipality is a municipality in the middle of Sweden, more or less where IIIEE headquarters are. And it was built in 1889. So, textbook historical building. We had to deal the great richness of problems. We have obvious signs of mold on the floor in two of the rooms. Mold expanded or surrounding inner and outer walls. We had practically the whole house was a thermal bridge, but what was more significant was the northeast side of the building. We had problems with the sewage because there were not changes since it was built. We had very poor air quality due to mold and microbes, among others. It's also the old type of ventilation system, only incoming air, not outgoing. So it was a big problem. Not insulated basement, and if you consider the old houses used the basement as a storage for different things, so we had an empty room full of humidity. The last owners had a dual heating system, oil and wood pellets, which, with the other condition of the building, just increased the problems. Also, the previous owners have performed rather sloppy interventions, and that has an explanation. They did it themselves, so they didn't need to take any confirmation from the municipality, because exactly the building was historic. So it would be too much extra cost and too much extra harsh for them. It has been characterized municipality as historical building from the municipality, and that means that we had to be very careful in the way we would renovate the facade, the windows, and the interior of it. It was the last functional building of a group of houses from its period. It was practically a small agricultural community there in the middle of the forest, and they want to keep it. It was extremely energy inefficient. We have calculated G energy class, and since Sweden compares them to the newly built, it had 235% more energy consumption compared to a newly built of the same typology. One could say that it was almost crap. But with the new owners, we have followed a very streamlined approach. First, we did a home visit and a beach-headed pre-renovation audit, just to see what we have to deal with, take some measures, and see what we're going to do with it. We came with some advice what they could change and what could be an action plan for them based on their house. Then we made a second visit we took some more detailed measurements on that since they agreed, and we came with a pretty clear quote and financing plan. Hopefully, they have agreed to do the work, so we have carried out the whole renovation, and we gave them the energy declaration in the end to apply for a green loan with the bank. Part of the renovation, we have secured financing for them, but the other part was through a green loan from the bank. Practically, since we are not allowed to share actual photos of the buildings, it is considered information that we cannot share. A bit schematic what we have done. We have changed doors and windows, but with windows we had the limitation due to the fact that it was a historical building, not change the glaze of the windows. Just practically we took out the windows, we have insulated the frame, and we put the windows back. The same with the doors. We have put some extra insulation. We have applied solar panels. We have helped them with smart solutions for their house. Ventilation system, which was important and was the trickiest job that we could do. Also, we have created a system to save the warm water and be used for other uses in the house. And we have changed the heating system from oil and pellet into ground source heat pump. We could do it. It was not, we didn't need to dig that deep for that. The one-stop shop team was consisted of one energy advisor, 2 electricians, 1 installer for the solar panel system, 1 expert in ventilation and heating systems, 1 plumber, 1 plate setter, 2 painters, 2 carpenters, and an architectural historian that came from the municipality to make sure that we followed the whole process. It wasn't planned at the beginning, but since the building was characterized as historical, we had to include that person as well. What have we achieved? From 235%, we got to 110% of the requirement for new buildings. So practically from energy class G to energy class D. For a building of this age, it was a huge change. We couldn't believe it even ourselves. We have improved the LSG ratio. We have better ambient lighting through absorbing energy radiation. We have played a bit with the windows, to be honest, and with the actual lighting that we had inside the house. We have allowed more natural light to get in, and that helped us a lot with the heat transference. Still low, but we have to think that we couldn't make change on windows. We couldn't put energy efficient windows, so we had to deal with what we had. But with the insulation we had overall 15% less heat loss from them. The indoor humidity was on a level of 42%, which is pretty cool compared to 70%, plus 70% that it was before. We have managed to have a pretty balanced temperature between 17 and 21 degrees in winter, which is accepted in Swedish building codes, and 22 to 26 degrees in summer. We have treated the mold. We had to be very careful because we had to keep the floor as it was. So we had to support it at the same time, treat the mold in it. Particles that affecting air quality showed great improvement with the change of the ventilation system. The energy use intensity was acceptable compared to the previous, and it's within the limits of a building of its age and its category. And also, we had quite good production from the PV system, mostly during spring and summer. 9 to 12 kilowatt hours, that is more than the needs of the actual building. They could sell about 2 kilowatts even to the grid, which was pretty good. The reality of numbers. They have bought that property for $48,000. Overall, the cost of renovation was $160,000. The valuation they got right after the renovation is $120,000 from 48. So, by my standards, it was a success with the house we had to deal. Some other considered a failure because we haven't managed to get a valuation price that actually could repay directly back. But this difference in overall price, within 10-15 years, it will be fully paid back. Maybe create some profit. Then we're going to the second ongoing renovation, which is actually the building I'm working at. Many fun facts with that building. It is built in 1904, but it is placed in the center of the medieval quarter of the city. In this medieval quarter, we have buildings that are built from 840 up to the late 18th century. And you will see how it affects later on. Problems to deal with. There were only problems, nothing else. To give an example, we tried to go to the basement. We knew that we had a building from 1904, what can go wrong? And the oldest element that we have found in the building was from 930. There was no way in the building design. We found as we searched for. So we went very careful with the steps to follow. First, since we saw that we have too many problems to deal with, we went with historical research and documentation. What was before that building? What happened when that building was built? Are there any archives to see what elements have they kept? What has changed? Then we did a site assessment, obviously. We are there all day, so we did it. Then we have to go back to see what kind of regulation we have to deal with and what kind of approvals we can get. Because this building is not only historical, it is also a heritage building because of the fact that it is in the medieval quarter of the city. Then we had to find information about the architectural design and planning since way back in time. We had to engage too many stakeholders, and they keep on coming. And then we had too many problems with material and craftsmanship assessment. Why? You will see why. The OSS team still is not finalized. New people keep on coming all the time. At the moment, we are 2 energy advisors, 4 electricians, 2 plumbers, 1 person from Municipal Historic Reservation Board, 1 interior designer, 2 historians, 4 conservationists, 2 structural engineers, 2 historic preservation specialists, 1 architect, 2 ventilation and heating system experts, and new people keep on coming. We assume that by the end of this renovation, the whole OSS team will be about 85 people. We still don't know. Every new thing that we find, a new person needs to be employed on that. And why? Very simple. The problem with the heritage buildings is that either you won't do any change or you will do changes that are by the book. You see an element that is in granite, you have to find the exact same granite in the exact same color, shape it the exact same way as it was in historical archives, and put it on that place. You have a brick, you need to see the consistency of bricks from that age, create the exact same bricks and put them back. You have a place that was colored, you have to color it with the exact same pigment, using the exact same recipe that was used back in time. So you need very specialized work. And some of this work is not easy to be found out in the market. There are not people that doing that type of work. Some of the problems. Obviously we had lots of mold around. For treating that mold, believe it or not, we had even 2 conservationists and 1 historian working on that. because the chemical, we have to be very careful with what kind of chemicals we're going to use. They're going to destroy the original material. And the end result, the coloring of the material is the same as it appears in the archives. We have to be very careful on that. The filling that we are going to put between different elements is the exact same recipe as it was used back in time. It has to be the exact same recipe. So you have to be very careful how to do it. Employ someone very specialized on that. You can see that we had also problem. I don't know why. We are close, of course, to the coast, but not that close. We had problem due to poor cleaning processes before with minerals in the material, which in granite, they don't work pretty well. So we had even to clean those minerals and make it to be as close as possible. We had elements that through time, okay, we talk about a building that is more than 100 years old with elements that some of them are more than 1,000 years old. So we had some cracks on the walls and we have to restore them. We had here the work, how it was before and how we did it in windows. Even the pigment should look the exact same in order to be acceptable as a renovation. In the balconies, again, mold treatment, and you can see this is test we did, the material as it was. We have used the same recipe to produce the new material and compare it to see that we're in the same color coding there. And the biggest problem, the tower of the building. Too much rainwater in the building, too much humidity, almost in the room to collapse. We had to fight more than 8 months to convince the municipality that, okay, we have to do this in order not this thing to collapse over our heads. We came at a solution that will not be too visible outside, but it will be functional for the building without disturbing its identity. We developed it. It went well, at least so far. We have to do everything from the beginning, take everything out, clean it, isolate it, insulate it, put it back again. And that was the end of the, actually this was 1 month ago. We put it finally and we are glad about it. After more than a year of renovation, the only parts of the building that we have renovated is the front side and 1/3 of the back side. Imagine a huge building that we have the inner yard, we have the rest, the sides of the buildings, and we have the basement. Remember, basement 930 Anno Domini. What are we going to do there? Nobody knows. What were the lessons we have learned from those renovations? At least myself, I have developed huge respect for historical integrity. It is very important, especially for the last building, to preserve significant architectural features. The inside of our building is even more beautiful, and there will be also a challenge for us how to renovate it. We had to become practical on site. Whatever we have planned before, when we came on site, it was another discussion. We had to come with practical solution, and in order to conserve this unique architectural characteristic and the methods that they have been used. We have tried as much as possible to integrate modern technology with respect to the past. On the first building, it was easier for us because we didn't have so many elements of the historical building that we didn't need to touch. In the latter building, practically we couldn't touch anything without getting permission. We have met in the process very, very specialized people doing extremely specialized work. And it is something that you really have to appreciate because they're not easy to find them. And especially on the latter building, we were pretty glad because we had community engagement. We had people from all over Lund coming. I have a photo of this building from 1930, from my father. I have my father's photo in front of this building. I have a relative that was working of what that building was before. We have some archives. I used to be a safety engineer for that building in the 50s. I have some designs. Without their engagement, we couldn't find the material we found about the building. So it is important to engage the society and also get their feedback, because they are people that they have interacted with that building. Huge risks when you go to old buildings, and you have to become practical in mind and quick in order to mitigate them. You need to see always the big picture. I renovate a historical house or a heritage building not only to serve the needs of nowadays, but with a view in the future. You have to be sensitive to the surrounding environment, because that is why they have been characterized as historical or heritage. They are deeply connected with their surrounding environment. We renovate it now, but the work we did in the house and the work we did in our building, it is like a testament of what needs to be done in the future. So we need to make sure that there will be knowledge transfer between the projects. And especially for the latter building, I have fully understood as an architect the importance of historic research. We did so much research that I feel that in a year I have acquired a new degree by itself, by reading things. Also, the importance of preservation principles, when they say that you have to keep the materials as they are, you need to be respectful, because they had a very specific use in the building, so you have to respect this. Follow a very sensitive design approach. You don't design based on your own vision. You try to revive someone else's vision there, and try to do it in a way that will be convincing. And of course, material conservation, that can be a huge nightmare. Trying to work with stonemasons techniques from the beginning of the century, or trying to work even with elements that are older, try to understand what they did, why they did that, why they have used that material, why they have used that type of insulation. Being in that process to understand it takes time, but is important. Also, what we have realized is that, okay, you cannot go full on in those buildings. You have to be very selective. So you make many different scenarios, and you end up with something that will be optimal and will not get the cost to the extremes. If we say that we are going to renovate textbook, the building, the last building that I showed, probably it will cost us about $100 million. It's impossible to do it. So you need to be more effective on that. And of course, engagement with traditional craftspeople. Quite many people in the construction industry, they don't respect those people. They are extremely useful when it comes to those projects. And of course, patience. It is a very long and painful process to follow, but it pays back in the end. And with that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the presentation and some of the beautiful pictures of the buildings. Was there someone living in that home that had the mold in it, and the one that you renovated? And as part of that, the $48,000 to a value of $120,000, a cost of $160,000. Where did that funding come from? Is there an expected or necessary return on investment from that funding source? And what other factors beyond financial allow a project like this to move forward?
It is necessity. First of all, we'll start from the last part of your question. First, it is the necessity of it. That area, that specific area, that this house is, almost 95% of the houses are 40s and before. So you have old houses. It is a necessity. I have to live in that house. It was new owners that bought it. The previous owners have sold it. They went in pension. They wanted to go to a bigger city. They left, just sold it. So it was going to be occupied again. As for the return on investment, if we went to the creme de la creme of solutions, for that, the cost would have been about $200,000. The fact that a house from a price of 48 went to 120, based on the improvements that we could do, it is significant. The fact also that the overall cost will be covered, you will be on the break-even plus some in 10 to 15 years, it is also relatively good based on what kind of renovation we did there. In some other houses, when we don't go that deep, you have in 5 to 7 years return on investment. In other houses that we will go deep, but the owner wants more extensive renovation and more high quality of products, we can go to returns of investment in 35 years that it's not that optimal. So we have to advise them that maybe you should not consider to do everything, do very selective measures that will give the actual return on investment. The financing, they had about $25,000 from own savings. We came with an agreement for the PV system for what they sell on the grid, finance the part, and the other, due to the declaration they got for the improvement, they got a green loan. The green loan in Sweden has very low interest rate for a period of 15 years, so practically the period that they would like to cover for the return on investment. So it was an optimal solution for them to do that.
So it was owner finance, it wasn't from the grants or government support?
No. In Sweden we don't have we have a very small return on tax if you do renovation work nowadays that is related to energy efficiency. Before it was general renovation work. But there is no national program in Sweden. In other countries, for example, France has highly developed program, national program. Belgium has a program right now. Netherlands, in some areas, they have municipal programs for energy efficiency. In Sweden, we still don't have this. Yes.
Is there any legislation that might make it a national program? I mean, are people trying to?
Yes. The fact that we have changed this tax benefit up to 2 years ago, it was related to any kind of renovation work. If you paint the outer walls of your apartment, of your house, you get the same benefit. Now we have changed that only if it is related to energy renovation. The green loans, 4 years ago, didn't exist in Sweden. We have pushed towards that direction in order to put more people doing energy renovation. The biggest problem is that if you go beyond the large urban environments, that you have very good mix of older and newer buildings, you have quite an old building stock. And in smaller cities that you will find houses between 60s and 80s, okay, can come with a very industrialized set of measures. You can say that based on your income, these are your 3 options, choose whatever works for you. But there are areas like the one we have renovated that all the buildings are old. Some of them are characterized as historical, and that binds the hand. That's why the previous owners as well, they went with own solutions in order not to have to get any kind of license from the municipality, not to have to pay those extra people, and they take the benefit that I will play a bit with my insurance, but I will save in cost of doing things. It's in general, some other countries, for example Switzerland, that 90% is old building stock. They came, every canton, we came there with a very specific legislation for the energy renovation of those old buildings. And it is it could be a guidance, actually, a guiding book for the rest of the countries. But in most of the countries, that's why you see very low interest in energy renovation. Because when they get to the old building stock, the costs skyrocket and they become more reluctant. Shall I do it? Even if the country presses, okay, I can do the bare minimum. that they can cover the 0.3.
Can I follow up with a
Yes.
question? I'm just, in terms of the one-stop shop model, to what extent are, I don't know if it's university programs or trade schools or any kind of certification programs, but it seems to me like if this is the future way of achieving energy sustainability, then it seems like a great growth market for jobs.
It is.
Yeah.
It is actually. The thing is that the companies in most of the countries mostly are occupied with a newly built market. Now that the newly built market all over Europe decreases, they see that option.
Yeah.
It's a market that has huge potential. And I have described the case of Sweden. If you go in other countries, we talk about similar or even larger potential. And it is a market for small and medium-sized businesses. Now they work as subcontractors to the big companies. But it is a market that stands by itself for them. And it is also in the legislation, in the different legislation of the European Union, it says that it is done in order to promote local economies of scale. So it focuses on those small companies. The big players, they have plenty of activities to deal with.
Are you seeing an increased need in terms of historical preservation with climate change of areas becoming wetter or drier, more or less stable? Is that accelerating in ways that make even the prospect of the historical preservation tenable?
If we put it in the Swedish context again, you will see how important it is on, let's say, northeast side of Sweden. 3 years ago, we have large floods that destroyed historical communities. So we need, there are programs right now, research programs in Sweden, that they work exactly with that thing. Renovate and preserve buildings with the thought of climate change scenarios. We work on that actively.
Is there an issue with like the thawing permafrost in the northern part of Sweden, or is that not so much of a problem?
The climate gets warmer up there.
Right.
So the biggest problem you have to deal in the north of Sweden is that you might pay the exact same amount for the renovation as you paid in central or south Sweden, but the property is not the same price.
Yeah.
And it will never, I can give you a market valuation of 120,000, but you will never sell 120,000 up there.
Yeah.
So it is a matter of market there that they don't decide to do it. Yes?
Are aesthetics a hugely important part in historic preservation? And when you've got really cutting-edge technologies that may lack in beauty over prioritizing function, do you run into any issues with that? And I ask specifically because we have these beautiful slate roofs here, and adding solar panels to them has been a non-starter because it would change the look so much and sort of change the integrity of the vision that certain people have for the site. I'm wondering if you've run up against the same thing.
With the second building that I have presented, it was necessary to come with a solution of installing a PV system, but there you make a conscious choice. Shall I put it on the front facade of the building where it's obvious, or shall I put it in a place that I will sacrifice a bit of efficiency, but I will still have that thing? We made the decision for the second one. We will place them at the side of the building that it's not obvious from the road. We will decrease a bit in terms of efficiency, but we will still have it. It goes hand in hand with legislation. The problem is, could we find different solutions? Absolutely yes. Are they affordable in terms of cost right now? No.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Georgios.